Hello and welcome to another of our AwSHUX preview videos. This one, a collection of games that are all deeply thematic. Now, to be clear up front, these are not reviews. We are not passing judgment or telling you what we think about these games. This, as just part of our online convention, we are taking a brief look and walking you through some of these games. So yes, this is not our opinions. Don't confuse them with reviews. Different videos. With that out of the way, let's have a look at Yucatan. Yucatan, you believe it? This is the kind of third part in the spiritual series that started with Cyclades, moved on to Comet, and is now doing other stuff in the form of Yucatan. And in this game, we are going to be trying to please the ancient gods in the only way that you can. Sacrifice. And what do they want? Just more and more sacrifice. All the time, sacrifice. Have you sacrificed anybody lately? You should probably get on that. Hurry it up. And in this game, we are going to be having people that we move around on a map, and we're going to be having battles. But this map is in some ways a lot more simple than in games like Comet. You'll notice here that there are these 3 cities that you're going to be trying to take control of, and in the middle of it here we have a whole bunch of different beasties and people who you can summon alongside your armies to help you out. Now, they don't usually live in the middle of the board like this. I've just put them here because I just felt like it was a good place for them to sit. And you'll also notice that this is a very, very early prototype of the game, so there's a lot of rough edges in both the plastics and the cardboard, and it's obviously all not final. This is honestly like one of the first copies ever made. It's quite exciting to be getting my hands on it. So at the start of the game, we're going to have our little player board here, and we're going to get to do some secret little upgrades right from the beginning. We've got these special tokens that allow us to choose one different type of upgrade that's going to be part of our city, to have our city leader doing something during the game, and we're also going to be able to upgrade our actual platoon leaders. Don't think they called them the platoons in this sort of ancient Mayan world, but you know, you get the idea. So right from the start, you're making some choices, you're putting some stuff down secretly, and then it's getting revealed, and that's going to define the kind of early game that you're going to have. I apologise for kind of burying the lead with the gigantic pyramid structure over here. We will come back to that in a minute. But first of all, you'll notice, yeah, on this board we have a bunch of different actions that we can take on a turn by placing a disc of our colour on one of these slots. We have building actions and we have leader actions. We have our city leader and our 2 military leaders. Now, in a round, you're going to have 4 rounds in the game, and then it's all done, see who sacrificed the best, and you're only allowed in each of these rounds to place 1 token on each of these leaders once. However, you can keep using the same structures again and again if you wish. And these leaders and structures do a bunch of different things. The leaders we're going to be using to move around onto the board. And you'll notice initially I've got one of my leaders with a little set of troops here in the jungle area of my board, ready to kind of move into the city and go and take one of these 3 different cities to try and get the rewards for doing so. However, we've also got the capacity to do a bunch of cool things on our board over here. For example, we can build new structures. You'll notice you get a free level 1 structure at the start of the game, but as you go on, you're going to be able to get different structures that you can build, which improve upon the stats of the things that are already there, allowing you to get better quality goods out of them. So the 5 things we can do with our buildings are build new buildings, get some battle cards, muster more troops, summon creatures, come back to you in a second, or just get some sweet, sweet coin. The 2 resources in this game are corn, not coin, too many games, and jade, both of which you're going to be spending to do all of these things. And now you'll see the DNA of the previous games in this sort of series starting to seep out in front of you, and the fact that when we do get into a fight and we send some troops into a city, let's say over here we have the blue player and some troops, and I'm going to move in over here with mine. Oh no, there's been an absolute pile up in the prototype minis lane. We're going to then play cards, and the DNA of these cards is very similar to what you'd have seen in Comet, having cards that have special abilities on them, also have values that get added to the battles. But the rub here is that when you actually play one of these in a fight, the vast majority of the time, these cards will then actually be removed from the game. Which means you go into a fight, you secretly put a card down, you flip it, and then that card is gone, spent. You've only got 5 at the start of the game, which means, yes, getting some from the big shared deck things that you can draw from time to time, which have pretty impressive, much more successful and cool battle moves in, is definitely going to be a thing you're going to want to be doing. And next up in the shared DNA town, well, yes, let's talk about the gigantic monsters. When you go down to the temple and you choose the action to summon a creature, you then find the token for that creature and you put it on your little summon slot for one of your 2 troops. Now I think this summons this chap whose sort of bird backpack isn't terribly well attached at this point, but still looks pretty cool despite that. Bird backpacks, God, I want one. And so what you would do then is that would get added to your troop and you would put one of these little timer tokens next to that on the board. These slot on over here and they tell you how many more turns you're going to actually have that summoned creature for before it disappears into the ether. And you can spend Jade when you're doing it to basically bump it up and make it last for longer amounts of time if you want the bird backpack man to hang around, and why wouldn't you? And all of this stuff, again, with some of the similar DNA to Comet in particular, is based on leveling up different aspects. You've got level 1 to 3 buildings. You can't build level 2 and level 3 ones unless you've leveled up your building ability. We've got this little board here that everyone's going to have their tokens on, which is going to basically denote what level they are at with these different types of 3 practices. Summoning things, doing the wars, and building stuff. And while you can only have 2 different armies moving around the board at any point, both of those armies can be upgraded with up to 3 additional leader bonuses, giving you generals who can do really cool stuff in terms of taking people hostage, because a lot of the battling in this is going to be about taking people hostage so you can sacrifice them. Yeah, let's move on to the final part of it. We've got this big sacrificial pyramid, and at the end of each round you are going to choose how many resources and prisoners, not terribly nice setting, let's be honest, you would like to sacrifice to the gods. Now the tricky thing here is, if you sacrifice loads of stuff, you get loads of points, you get loads of rewards, and if you sacrifice the most out of everyone around the table, then you get to move one of your leaders 1 step up the pyramid. The further you get up the pyramid, the better the prizes you can get. It's very much like a game show. But crucially here, if you get loads of points, which you will early in the game, you get more points for sacrificing people than you would at the end when the gods are kind of bored of all that, then next turn your impetus is to try and beat your score for the sacrifice points last turn in order to get the bonuses. So it's a kind of an escalation of just murdering as many people as you can and then trying to murder even more next time so you can keep the gods super peachy. And that is a basic rundown of Yucatan. You can see as the game goes on, each of these cities has 4 columns, each of which have different actions that you can take immediately upon seizing the city from another player, and each of these, more of these are going to be unlocked as the game progresses through the 4 rounds, spicing it up considerably. Again, not a huge amount of locations. Everyone has their own jungle location on their board, and then these 3 different cities, and you can move from a city to a jungle, and that's about it. So you're just basically doing constant guerrilla warfare, taking people as prisoners, and then murdering them for points on the massive pyramid of board game death. And that's Yucatan, coming out next year, I think. This is Dune, a game of conquest and diplomacy, and this is also Dune, the desert planet, a planet which historically its main export has always been the colour brown, as shown here by these 2 reference Satsumas. That's my dinner. Anyway, if you are familiar with Dune the board game, or Rex before that, then this is kind of similar. We did a review of a Dune board game that was made by Gale Force 9, just like this was, a couple of years ago. This is a bit different. First of all, it's got all the movie actors that you know on it. There we are. We got the pretty man, the angry bald one, and the beard ones. All of them. Fantastic. However, this isn't the same game. Somewhat unusually, this is a trimmed down version of that game. So there's a bunch of things that are slightly different, but generally speaking, it just rattles along a lot faster and a lot of the fluff is gone. So on this board, we have a whole bunch of different sectors defined by lines on the map, as you'll see, but also these little lines that show us where the storm moves around, because the first thing you need to know is there is a storm that is going to be moving around the planet and destroying pretty much everything it passes, whether that's armies or resources. Unless, of course, you're hiding away in the mountains or in some of the few strongholds around the planet, or if you are playing as the Fremen, the people who effectively love the desert and everything it brings and are fine with getting a bit dusty. Doesn't affect their armies. Now, straight off the bat, I should say that this game is hugely influenced mechanically by the lore of the universe. So there's a bunch of little things here and there that effectively make sense if you're familiar with that, although not as much as Dune, the game we reviewed a couple of years ago. Again, a lot simpler. You're going to be moving things around the map in order to take control of different areas, and there is going to be spice blowing up all over the place. The good stuff. This is the spice bank, and genuinely, that kind of flows. There's enough there to generate a flow. Each round in the game, after the storm has passed around to another new zone, you're going to be flipping over some spice cards and revealing, oh, lots of sandworms today. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I guess I didn't shuffle them in. After we've moved the storm around and everything's got destroyed, we're going to reveal a spice blow card. Now, the way this works is it's just going to mark 2 different areas on the map, which then we're going to correspond and go, okay, spice is blowing up here and here. Now, everything that is in an area when the spice blows is destroyed. Any spice, any armies, everything. It's the price of success. And then there's going to be all of this money just sitting around. Boomf. Boomf. It's not money, it's spice. Let's not be thematically rude. And then armies are going to be moving around the board trying to be there at the end of the round in the hope of harvesting and collecting that spice. And in the meantime, obviously, there's going to be battles. If you end up in the same space as somebody else, then you're going to be having fights. And we've got all these cards over here, these battle cards that you're going to be drawing and holding in your hand, allow you to do all sorts of things like poisoning characters, just generally murdering people. It's a bit like Star Wars, but nastier. Let's be real. But truly, the spiciest element of Dune is still here in the form of this battle wheel. The battle wheel with the slot. So every time you're having a fight on the map, you're going to look at how many armies you have there, how many units. And I might, for example, say have 6 units and somebody else has 3 in an area. And I might think, okay, well, look, I've now got to decide how many I want to commit to this fight. And committing them crucially means losing them. So in this fight, for example, I've got this wheel and I know that the maximum the other player can commit is 3. But I'm feeling a bit worried, so I might say, hey, you know what, actually, I'm going to commit 4 forces here. And that means that even if I win the fight, 4 of my forces get wiped out immediately. The cool thing is that we also got these leader tokens. Now, each of the 4 factions in the game have their own little stack of these leader tokens, and you're going to choose one and slot it in. And they each have different values that are going to be added to the combat value, and we flip that over, and then we see what we've both got by revealing them, add up the numbers, and see who has got what and who's won. But bury the lead here, because you may have seen over here in these little cards here, one of the decks here is called the Traitor deck. Now, each of these different hero characters that each of the 4 different factions have a traitor card as well somewhere in a deck, potentially in someone's hand. And if you send that noble into a battle with someone else and then they reveal that they have your traitor card for that character, then they just win the battle, because actually that person was never on your side to begin with. Pretty nasty. Pretty nasty. And the last thing you need to know in this tornado tour of the planet that is Dune is that these 4 different factions you can play as each have unique abilities. House Atreides basically allow you to see one element of your opponent's battle plan before it starts, whether that's the number on the dial, the leader they've put into it, or the card that they're playing on the defense side. Whereas the Fremen have a bunch of little things. They can ride the worm. It's pretty gnarly. Also, they basically don't lose units when the storm comes around. Generally pretty good at that sort of thing. Imperium have the ability to tell their opponents that they must play a certain type of card with their battle wheel when they fight. So if they have it, they have to. You must play a poison card. Just generally get in people's heads a little bit, and they have to comply if they can. And finally, House Harkonnen, let's be real, they're just horrible. they get more traitor cards than anybody else. They just get more at the start of the game and they can get more of them easily. You just don't want to be fighting against them because a lot of the time it's going to turn out that your people have sold out to the nasty bald crew. So really a lot of that. There's more to it, but not a huge amount more. The battle cards are a lot less complex and wacky than they are in the base game. You've got the market cards still that allow you to give that little bit of an edge, and you can buy them each round to just get a little bit of extra action on the side and make things go to your benefit a little bit easier. A lot of the mechanics of bringing people back from tanks and getting leaders back and forth, still there, but crucially as well, there's only 4 factions in this rather than 6, and a lot of the rules are not here. I mean, you'll notice there's not even like boards to hide resources, etc. It's all a lot more fast-paced, transparent, and people on a map see. And that is Dune, a game of conquest and diplomacy from Gale Force 9. Plays 2 to 4 players, and actually crucially one of the cool things about this edition of it is it does include a 2-player head-to-head mode, which allows you to basically play 2 factions at once in a kind of mashed up way to turn a game that you really couldn't play with 2 before into something that you can. Don't get Satsumas in the box though. These are mine. Also, it wouldn't ship well, so it's probably for the best. Thanks!
Galaxy! Galaxy! Up next we are looking at the brand new edition of a game that I personally know and love. This is Vlada Chvátil's Galaxy Trucker with new art by, oh, these are some Czech names that look very intimidating to pronounce. Maybe I'll just bring them up on camera now. And let me tell you, if you don't know Galaxy Trucker, oh boy, have I got one heck of a bizarre game to show you. If you do know Galaxy Trucker, I can tell you that not much has changed in this new edition. Honestly, the biggest change is that all the components are nicer and look prettier, and perhaps more importantly, they've squeezed the game into a smaller box, which I'm a huge fan of. There's a few extra components, there's some balance tweaks, there's this new little achievement system that I quite like, which I'll get to later, but mostly the game hasn't changed. So Galaxy Trucker is a game of 2 halves. In the first half, players are going to be building ships, kind of like Scrap Heap Challenge, if you've ever seen that TV show. You're going to be doing this in real time, simultaneously, and then after all of that tension, you get the enormous relief of everybody takes off into space and has an adventure, which basically means everyone's ships are going to fall apart. Not all of you are going to make it home. Not everyone's going to make money. Someone's going to end up in debt. And basically you're going to giggle as these ships you've made prove almost always deeply inadequate for the task at hand. So let me explain how you build. So you're going to set this sand timer rolling. Bam. And you can safely ignore it unless any of your friends end up flipping it, but we'll get to that. Players then simultaneously reach into this pile of face-down tiles. They then can only turn them face up once they're over their board, so people can't just flip tiles face up in the junkyard. And then you're going to place it on your board. And there's a series of connectors here. You've got universal connectors, which can connect to either 2-pipe connectors or 1-pipe connectors, but 2 and 1-pipe connectors can only connect to each other. Also, as you're building, I mean, some very important considerations here. First off, if you put a tile on your board and it's legal and you know that, you then can't move it or change it. You have to consider your board as if it's covered in glue. And that's problematic because guns always have to, well, no, guns can point in any direction, but they can't face into the ship. Engines have to face backwards because that's how engines work. Engines can't have anything behind them. All kinds of little considerations like this. So then what are you trying to build? Well, allow me, and I bet I get to do this, allow me to bring out a ship that I made earlier. Okay, so what we've got here, oh, hang on, I've actually made a mistake there, that's embarrassing. What we've got here, we've got a couple of engines, that's good. We've got a few guns, that's good. We've got plenty of crew compartments, that's good. We've got plenty of space for our galactic cargo that we will hopefully pick up on our run. And we've got some batteries which are going to help power this shield pointing down and to the right. Would be great if I also had a shield pointing up and to the left, but I don't. I mean, even in my wildest Galaxy Trucker fantasies, my ships are a bit broken. But mostly players are going to have embarrassments. They're going to have ships that are all hanging together through one sort of lynch tile, that if that falls apart, the whole ship gets ripped in half. You're going to have people going, oh no, I forgot to put any batteries in, so my shields don't work. Everyone's going to make horrible mistakes. It's partially because the way that the sand timer works in this game is I told you that once you start building, you flip the sand timer, right? Once it's emptied, you can all ignore it. But any player who's content that they're done with their building can reach over and flip it again. Now, in future rounds of Galaxy Trucker, there'll be more sand timer flips. But in this first round, all you need to know is you can only flip the sand timer when you personally are done, and then all the other players have, because we're on the last space of the sand timer track, until this sand runs out to finish building their ships. So hopefully at least one engine, some crew, one gun, just the basics, you know. But then once players all have their ships, you are going to take off. Now, you're not necessarily blasting off into the great unknown here, but these cards have all kinds of stuff. You don't really know what you're going up against. It could be you flying into a war zone, an asteroid fields, at which point you want shields. Could be there's going to be loads of cargo for you to pick up, at which point you want to have loads of room to store it on your ship. But if you're me, you're just going to try and build a good ship and then go with it. But that's not how you have to play. During that building phase, while the sand is running out, players can grab any one of these 3 piles of cards and look at them and be like, okay, that's coming up, and then put it down and go, okay, that's coming up. And the reason there are 3 decks here is because you can only look at one at a time. So if I grab this, I can't like pick up all the cards. I can look at this, someone else might look at this, you know, I might put it down, you know, all this stuff. But while we're looking at cards, of course, that's us wasting valuable building time. And also, you see this little extra couple of cards at the top? Those cards are cards that nobody can look at, so there will always be a little bit of a surprise. But once everyone's done building, you're going to grab all of those cards, you're going to shuffle them up, and then you're going to take off. And at this point, it's not quite right to say that the game plays itself. You know, you don't necessarily have a lot of decisions to make while you're in space, but it's more like, I mean, I just don't want to give the impression that this isn't fun, because actually this is the best part of the game. So I'll just blitz through some of the stuff that you might encounter on your way. Well, first and foremost, the name of the game is Galaxy Trucker, so hopefully you'll find some planets along the way which will enable you to pick up cargo. Now, whoever gets first choice of this cargo is going to be whoever's in the lead, which initially is whoever took off first, you know, who finished building their ship first. But later, as the convoy goes on, you will have the opportunity to use lots of engines, if you've got them, to push your way into the lead. Being in the lead is good, right? You get first pick. Well, maybe. I mean, you might encounter some slavers or other ships that want to destroy you. And if that happens, you don't want to be in the front of the convoy. You definitely don't. Because these ships will do all kinds of stuff. They might steal your cargo. In the case of the slavers here, they're going to steal your crew. But if someone has this many guns, they can destroy the ship and get the cash prize at the bottom. Other things you can encounter, I mean, classic. You're going to encounter meteors and asteroids, the Galaxy Trucker cards. These are just the worst. So for each meteor on the card, and you'll get cannons and flying through war zones later as well, someone, I believe the person at the head of the convoy, is going to roll some dice. So I'm going to do this for every meteor. So in the case of this card here, I rolled a 5, and we're going to go left and right. So big meteor coming in to column 5. And then everyone's going to look at their board and see if they're protected or not. And in the case of, let's use my example here, we've got a big meteor. Big meteors need to be broken up with a laser cannon. Do we have a laser cannon there? No, we don't. So we're just going to lose that tile. And oh, this is a pretty good example of why Galaxy Trucker is amazing. You'll see that that tile was the only tile hanging on to this gun and the engine I've got here. So all of that is going to go falling off my ship into space. And that's fine because I still have one engine left. Although every tile that falls off your ship, you're going to pop into this zone up here, and that's going to cost you 1 credit per tile that you lose. But of course, you're also becoming less and less prepared for everything you might encounter on your run because your ship is losing those components that were supposed to keep you safe. But then, of course, that was just the large meteor. We'll then roll for the small meteor, and then we'll roll for the big meteor. And everyone will groan or cheer as they get through scathed or unscathed. What else might you find in this deck? Let's find out. You might find abandoned stations and ships which require crew. If you have enough crew, you can collect those 2 red cargo containers from the abandoned station, or you can send people into the abandoned ship for a quick payday, but those people aren't going to come back. Just don't worry about that. You might find open space, these cards which allow you to fire all of your engines and try and accelerate past your friends. You might also encounter stardust, which is going to slow you down for every exposed connector on your ship. But eventually, probably, hopefully, at least one of you will make it through the entire deck of cards for your adventure, and then you'll get to sell all of the cargo you collected on the run. You'll get a few extra bucks if you came first or second. And also, in this version of Galaxy Trucker, this is new, you have these little achievement tiles. So the person who sold the most cargo or had the most batteries is going to get to claim this achievement tile and get a bit of money as well. And there's a lovely twist to these tiles, but we'll come back to that later. For now, just think of them as achievements, but this is a Vlada game, so you know there's going to be a twist in the tale. So that's the basic game of Galaxy Trucker. But It's not the whole game of Galaxy Trucker, no, because the correct, in my opinion, way to play this game is as the full 3-round game. Because then, after you've completed your first sort of inaugural flight, you are going to swap this player board out for the level 2 player board, which involves bigger, more horrible cards from the level 2 deck. In fact, the cards aren't even just worse, there's also more of them, so you're going on a longer, more dangerous flight. But that's okay, because players can flip their player boards and see that next round they're going to be building an even bigger ship. And then, spoilers, you're going to do this again with a level 3 ship. And of course, that's going to involve some truly, truly horrific level 3 cards. But do you remember I told you there was going to be a twist with these achievements? So, oh, this is so mean. Let's just stick with the battery guy for now. So if you have the most batteries on your ship in round 1, you can get the battery award and get a bit of extra money. Then, in round 2, the game wants you to be the battery guy. You want to see if you can defend your title. So that player, and only that player, if they continue to have the most batteries in round 2, will get an even bigger payday. But then, in round 3, these become penalties. So where before you just were trying to be the cool battery guy, in round 3, you're still trying to be the cool battery guy for an even bigger payday, but when you're building your ship, you're going to have the unique restriction that your battery components cannot be next to components that use that battery power. I should also mention here that this is the basic way to play, but there are some advanced components. You're going to add alien life support modules if you choose to play the advanced game. By putting one of these life support modules next to a crew cabin, that cabin can have an alien who's either an engine boosting alien or a gun boosting alien. And that's great. It's by far the most efficient way to improve your cannon power or engines. There's just one small catch, which is if the life support component happens to get cleaved off your ship, then you guessed it, the alien is not going to survive it at all. You know, I tell people that what we try and achieve with Shut Up and Sit Down is a board game review show that is simultaneously both the smartest and the dumbest of all the board game reviews. And so I feel a real kinship with Vlada designs like Galaxy Trucker, which is simultaneously so clever and also just excruciatingly dumb, and in equal measure. You know, I got a lot of time for that. Let's see what the next game is.
This is In Too Deep by Burnt Island Games. It plays 1 to 5, and it is a super atmospheric game about being a police person who's secretly infiltrated a criminal syndicate by taking control of their mind with technology. Yeah, you're going to be jacking into the mind of some of these criminals who are part of the syndicate, moving them around the city, getting them to do things that you want with the hope of getting the intel that you need collectively to try and solve the case and put these horrible, nasty people in prison. But there is the potential that you might end up in too deep and roaming around in the brains of these characters for too long and becoming yourself a bad egg. Now each player is going to get their own player board here, in addition to a couple of cards which are going to represent some missions that they're going to be trying to do at the start of the game. Now you've got your kind of main story missions you're all going to be trying to do alongside one another, kind of not working together, but you are going to be progressing through stories. And then you've also got these other kind of side crime cards, they're called, where you might just do a bit of crime on the side, just a bit of mild crime. But the main thing about these boards is you're not actually individually playing any of these colourful characters that you can see on the main board. Now these are the plastic deluxe minis from the Kickstarter version of the game. In the retail version they're just some cardboard standees. But you can see there are a whole bunch of these on the board. We've got 6 in total, but actually in the game itself there are a whopping 10. And you're not going to be playing with all of them at the same time, but they can appear in different games. And there's quite a nice variety of character design going on here. We have the Drone Jack, the Persuader, the Mechanic, the Ghost, the Scourge, the Disruptor, the Fixer, the Sprinter, and the Jumper. Or if you live in the United States, the Sweatshirt. It's a bad joke, but I will not apologise. And so on your turn, if you don't currently have a mind connection to one of these criminals, you're going to have to grab one at the start of the turn by hooking into one of these members of the syndicate. And you hook a character by effectively taking their token from the middle section of the board, the void, or from another player if someone else is currently controlling them, and slotting it into your board in the top free slot. And as you take hold of these characters and use them to do things, you're naturally going to develop a grip on this particular character, moving their token up this track further, giving you access to their abilities that allow you to do special things in the game, and also, as you get really high up on the track, allowing you to actually take extra actions using those characters at a cost of spending those resources. Pretty neat. Crucially though, you don't want to have too many links to too many characters at once, and in fact you'll see on your board here, if you at any point have a link to 3 different characters and you link to a third one, then you're going to have to take a consequence for that. There's this little deck of cards which is effectively stuff that you don't really want to happen, and these cards are going to give you bonuses at the end of the game. However, they're also going to give you corruption. They're going to make you a bit too criminal by linking up to these people too much. So you're going to be moving these characters around between the different areas, using them to pick up items, which in this version of the game actually quite neatly slot into the plastic bases, like so, carry them round, and then when you've met the criteria of one of the mission cards in your hand, you can dump the items, lose all of your current hooks to these characters, unplug from the matrix, and achieve that objective. And the reason you want to do that is because you can actually then get evidence to try and crack the case, which is where we move on to some of the other esoteric boards in this colourful thing. This is kind of a combination of evidence and boosts over here. Now, the way this works is effectively every time you take a piece of evidence, you're going to first of all take one from this bottom selection of things which are visible, different types of evidence, and then any remaining ones you take in that action, you take from the mystery selection. When this runs out and it keeps topping up, it's going to be the end of the round, and after 3 rounds the game is over and you see what the situation is. Now, the crucial thing about evidence here is when you complete objectives, there's going to be different types of evidence you're going to get. Some of them is going to be evidence for you that you can then place on the collective evidence board, which is over here. Let me just go and grab this. Da, 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 da. Now, throughout the game, players are going to be putting evidence into their individual locker, which is going to go face down and remain hidden. However, sometimes people are going to be putting locker evidence into the generic, happy, share-it-all police locker. And this is one of the constants throughout the game, in the fact that between rounds you're going to get a sense of what stuff might be getting put into the collective evidence locker, and that's going to be important because the scoring at the end for these tokens is going to be relative to how many of each type of token are in there. So you want to be cramming your locker full of really relevant information. But potentially more important than that are these dossiers at the top of the board, these little wooden dossiers that basically you need a certain type of evidence in order to actually take one of these dossiers during a round. So I need to have this type, or this type. If I'm able to place that on the board, I can take one of these dossiers off, put it onto my player board, and that means that at the end of the round, I'm going to be rewarded for that. Crucially though, we need to get rid of all of these to actually crack the case. And if we do crack the case, and there's kind of a case at the end of each round, then you're going to get points for all the dossiers. But if we don't crack the case, then nobody gets any points for the case, and we've been bad detectives collectively. And this is where the element of being in too deep really comes into it. One of the elements in this game is you're going to be collecting these tokens that basically allow you to resist corruption. You can slot into the bottom of your player board and allow you to stop becoming too criminal whilst in the criminal minds. But maybe you don't bother, because if at the end of the game the last case hasn't actually been cracked, then it doesn't matter which player is the most corrupted, because criminals kind of won anyway. Now, that doesn't mean that the most corrupt player wins. It just means that usually at the end of the game you get a pretty hefty negative bonus, but that won't be an issue. So maybe you could push your luck with that. And then, as you can see around the city here, we've got all these different locations and all these different things going on. All of the characters have individual abilities you can use if you get an affinity with them. Each of these locations have abilities that you can trigger. However, doing so is going to attract these little lore robots to that space, and you can only activate those when there are no lore robots there. We've even got the Sentinel, this super lore robot that can move around the board doing horrible things, and sometimes things that are horrible to other people that you wanted to happen. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on here, and more than we can get into in a short preview, but All in all, it's a fascinating and quite colourful game of mixed information, gentle bluffing, and people working together, sometimes, but mostly not, whilst pulling at shared resources in a way that might be sometimes aggravating or uncomfortable. And that is In Too Deep from Burnt Island Games.
Up next, we have Sea of Legends from Guildhall Studios. This is a huge pirate adventure game that's driven by an app. During the game, players are trying to gobble up notoriety like greedy pirate toddlers. And you're going to get that notoriety in a bunch of ways, like upgrading your ship, going on adventures, burying gold, or defeating other pirates. The first player to 10 notoriety will win the game. But before we can get into earning notoriety, we've got to set this thing up. And that's pretty simple. Each player will get their own character, represented by these little miniatures here, as well as a starting ship card and a set of 3 crew. Alongside this, each player will receive a love interest and a nemesis. Here, my character Spell hates John, the ace of escapades, but bloody loves Ishmael, the mad mariner. These 2 characters, alongside your player themselves, are going to create a sort of unique pirate profile that you'll use to interact with the game world. And then it's time to choose which NPC factions we have in this world. The game recommends you always play your first game using the Spanish Armada and 2 other factions. I've picked the Dead Tide and the Atlantean Usurpers. These individual factions will give a certain flavour to each version of the game that you'll play, introducing new mechanics to the world that you'll have to overcome. Once you've placed your starting tokens and chosen the factions that you're going to begin the game with, the game is ready to start, and each round of Sea of Legends will feature player turns and faction turns. Player turns couldn't be simpler. You will move and take an action. Moving is incredibly straightforward. You'll take your player character and move them a number of spaces depending on your ship's movement stats, as well as any other bonuses that you might have. And once you're done with your movement, you can take one of 3 actions. You can either go on an adventure, take a port action, or challenge anything in your space. To take the first option, go on an adventure, a player has to be in the same spot as their lover or nemesis, or just chilling on their own. The way you'll do this is by consulting the app, picking your captain, and choosing which adventure you want to go on, and then reading the story that comes out of it. And you'll pass the phone to the player to your left so they can read out all your misfortunes to the rest of the table. But what about the other actions in the game? The second option is to take a port action, and this will depend on what kind of port you're currently hanging out at. Taverns will have you drawing tavern cards and playing tavern games. These will give you bonuses that you can then immediately apply to your pirate captain. Underneath there, you've got a rumour that will give you a specific relic that you might find in a certain region. And upon going to that region, you can flip the card and gain that item, such as this very fancy hat for Mr. Césaire. The second kind of port space is a shipyard, where you can take shipyard actions. And here you can spend your hard-earned gold to upgrade your ship to level 2 or even level 3 boats that'll do more damage and move faster. The third kind of port action is a hiring hall that will bring new mercenaries on board your ship. Here you'll draw 3 cards from the top of the deck, and you can hire as many as you've got the money for. These cards will confer a variety of different bonuses, buffing up your ship to be able to take more daring actions. The last kind of port space is a hideaway, and this one's fairly simple. If you have 10 gold at a hideaway space, you can bury it, which will just score you 1 notoriety. And finally, the third action you can do on your turn is to declare a challenge. Here you can challenge a player, an NPC, or a port, scooping up a dice pool based on your target and based on your skills of your crew. Here I've got a rubbish little boat that'll give me 1 dice, a gunner that'll give me another, and you'll always get the 4 captain dice. You'll then roll these dice and take a look at your total strength, maybe manipulating it with some of your other abilities. But also you'll notice that there are some weird symbols on these dice. On some of these dice you'll see the lover and nemesis symbol. You'll cross-reference the number that you have of those with your lover or nemesis abilities. Depending on how far along you've gotten in their storyline, the lover will give you positive bonuses and the nemesis will try and scupper your plans. Syncing NPCs will net you a bevy of bonuses depending on which faction you're playing. We'll get to that in a bit, but syncing other players will net you their treasures and gold. And taking a port, which are typically pretty hard to break into, will let you take control of that port, giving you a permanent income bonus as well as a flood of instant cash. So that is sort of a streamlined version of what a player's turn looks like, but I've kept you waiting long enough. What's going on with these massive miniatures? Each game of Sea of Legends will have you fill the world with a number of NPC factions. And each faction comes with its own unique set of gimmicks and rules. The Dreadtide, for example, will place undead soldiers onto the map, forming hordes, and maybe even assembling into this skeletal colossus. And these huge skeletal boys are going to turn up everywhere and infest the ports that you want to take control of. And if the Dreadtide infest enough ports, then they're going to win the game instead of any player. So not only do these factions present depth and challenge in the world, they also will produce a state in which they win the game instead of you, which is a nightmare. The Spanish Armada will sort of mill around and occupy ports. They're the kind of stock evil faction in the game. And the Atlantean usurpers introduce a kind of giant fish chase into the game, where this big guy flails around while being chased by seekers. There are a couple more factions in the box, and each one comes with its own gameplay twist, like this. But how do these things actually work? Well, once every player has taken a turn, the factions will take their turn. And these are resolved very similarly to a standard player turn. You'll activate an NPC and evaluate their objective, moving towards that objective and attacking if needs be. Each faction has their own rules for how their moving and attacking will work, and they'll also even attack each other. After the faction turn is completed, we will draw an event card, and each one of these corresponds to a certain faction. And most of these see the faction increasing in strength and then doing something based on that new strength. For example, the Spanish Armada will increase the level of all their galleons and then place galleons in sea regions. And once you have resolved all the faction turns in order, we'll pass the first player marker and a new round begins until one player manages to get 10 notoriety or one of these factions finishes their goal. This is a weird one to preview because evidently so much of the game is rooted in the strange interactions between your nemesis, lover and captain, as well as things that are going to happen during the app and these factions warring off against each other. Warring off? There's plenty of variety in the box, so you can always be playing on a different kind of sea. Perhaps changing your strategy between games, focusing on different parts of the system. And remember, your unique captain has their own bonus too, and there are expansion factions as well. So that is Sea of Legends from Guildhall Studios, a competitive pirate simulator that takes a couple of hours.
What is this, Quentin magazine? No way, Josie. This is Tartarus Gates by the company Adventure Presents. This is a one-shot role-playing game of sci-fi horror written by Grant Howard and Chris Taylor with art by Piper. And this is super neat. Looks like a magazine, right? Sold like a magazine, but it's not. This is my mint copy. Let me just grab my copy here. Using the middle of the book, here's what you're gonna do. I pre-did this, but we've got the GM reference book. We do a little rip. We get the How to Play book, which is just a couple of pages, very straightforward RPG. Ooh, don't look at that, because this is a confidential document. This is a confidential document. There's another confidential document. We got character sheets, and then we have the adventure itself. So this is what the GM reads. This is what the GM reads during the adventure. It's all the materials that you need. Look at that. And you just need to add some pens and 3d6. And you are good to go. So, I mean, where to start? Well, let's talk about the system first before we talk about the adventure. This is awesome. Grant Howard, of course, has been doing some really, really nice work in the RPG community with really simple rule sets, and Tartarus Gate is no different. You're going to pick your character who has some stats, And then every skill check in the game sees you rolling all 3 dice. If your stat is 1, you remove the highest dice. If your stat is 2, you remove the middle dice. If your stat is 3, you remove the lowest dice. And if your stat is 4, you keep all 3 dice. And then very simply, the numbers that you keep added together is your skill check score, and then there's various different items, and there's also a willpower system where you can push yourself if a check's really important, and then every character has specific drives, and if you play according to those drives, the GM might let you recover some willpower to make you good again. And let's just talk a little bit about this adventure you're doing. This is kind of, the closest point of reference is probably Alien, the Ridley Scott film, but with a bit more of a cyberpunkian sense of humour. You all play characters who are unpaid interns on a ship heading to Tartarus Gate. You can play a soldier if you like, you can play a scavenger, or you can play an influencer who got busted for faking content. And when the adventure begins, you are going to wake up from deep sleep and something's gone wrong on the ship, and it's time for you and your friends to explore the ship and figure out why you got woken up in deep space, what's wrong, and I really don't want to reveal much more than that. But suffice to say, this is a horror game, so bad things are happening, but also, as you'd expect from Grant Howe, it's a horror game with a sense of humour and with a lot of unexpected twists, and the whole thing you can wrap up in an evening. Now let's be real, organising RPGs is often just really intimidating. Tartarus Gate, it gives you an adventure that's like robust, so the game's master can like absorb the whole thing themselves, know what they're doing, know what they're running, and yet the rules are just so straightforward. You know, absolutely minimalist is the word. This is super cool. I think, like, and to sell it as a magazine where you just pull everything out and need a minimum of components, this is really, really neat. I would go as far as to say this is impressive. I might go as far as to say this is my favourite new format for role-playing games that I've seen in some time. Very cool stuff. But let's take a look at what the next game is.
Up next, we have Quests and Cannons. This is a game of adventure and fantasy on the high seas. And this game can be played in a bunch of ways. It can be a free-for-all game, it can be a team game, or it can be an entirely cooperative experience. Before getting into the rules though, it's important to mention that this is a prototype. You can expect a much nicer production in the final version, and speaking of production, it's important to mention that this board is all made up of weird little hexes. The board for Quests and Cannons is entirely modular, so you can set it up in a different way each time. But what we've got here is the default intro setup, and we've also dealt every player their own character. At the start of the game, each player will get their own little shipboard, and they'll take their player character and socket it in. Their starting character will also determine how many sails, cannons, and pieces of cargo space that player has. And these are also little pieces that you can pop in to their respective slots. Very clacky and satisfying. Every player will put their little ship in its port and take a map clue, and then you are ready to begin. So in this game, each player is a representative for their nation who are going out into this big bubbly blue sea to earn prosperity. The game ends when players reach a certain prosperity threshold. A lower value if they're working solo, but higher if you're playing as a team. And on a turn, players will take 3 actions, marking them with this little handy counter over here. And those actions are incredibly simple, so we'll start by talking about the move action. To move, players will spend 1 action to move 1 space. Now that doesn't sound like much, but players can extend their movement by exhausting these sail tiles, flipping them over to gain a movement per sail exhausted. And on the board, there are various spots that will impede your movement. Stormy seas like this one will take 2 movement to get through, and treacherous seas with these tentacles will have you rolling a dice and hoping for the best. A roll of 4, 5, or 6 will give you an extra movement, but a roll of 1, 2, or 3 will cause your ship a little bit of damage, which is bad news, but it will give you a traveller bonus, which will make travelling through these tentacles a little easier later on. But why might players want to move? Well, they might want to reach certain landmarks, like trading posts, harbours, or islands. The Risen Islands are perhaps the most useful, as when you turn up, you'll find out what resource that place produces. Resources can be spent or traded later on to gain all kinds of upgrades. And you can spend one of your actions to gather that kind of resource as many times as you want and pop it into your hold. Risen Islands will also give you quest cards that you'll draw from this deck, showing you a specific goal that you now have to achieve that will give you prosperity and money for doing so. You also might want to go to these islands because of your clue cards. You start the game with one and you'll draw more as the game progresses. By spending actions to solve these clues, you will get a reward. You'll first draw a new clue with a new target, and then you'll choose either to gain a prosperity or one of these loot cards. Loot cards can be socketed into your ship with new bonuses, and maybe this is an important time to mention that your custom captain has their own bonus as well. So you'll want to kit out your ship depending on what kind of playstyle you're going for. Maybe if you're going for a lot of clues, you'll want to add loads of sails so you can move around the map quickly. But maybe if you're feeling a little violent, you might want to stock up on cannons. One of the actions a player can take if they are in the same space as one of their fellow players is to attack them, rolling dice equal to the number of cannons they have and hoping to hit for some damage. You'll spend an ammo, or 1 dice, per cannon you are firing. And after your roll, you'll tot up your total. Every 4 pips you roll will deal 1 damage, and if you manage to sink a ship, that's bad news for them. Any damage you do will grant you a prosperity, but sinking will grant the attacking player 3 prosperity. And the player who is sunk will lose coins, resources, and ammo as they sink to the bottom of the briny depths. But how do you tool up to tackle all this combat? Well, if you visit one of these port spaces, you have opportunities to trade and upgrade. There are 3 kinds of ports in the game. Maintenance ports will let you buy ammo, repair your ship, and sell stuff. Upgrades will let you buy new sails, cannons, and cargo slots by paying money and materials. And trade ports will let you swap resources, buy loot cards, and buy clues. Once a player or team reaches the prerequisite amount of prosperity, which I think is 15 if you're on your own, but a little bit more if you're in a team, you'll end the game. We'll do one more round, and then the player with the most prosperity at the end is crowned the winner of quests and cannons. But what if I want to play this a little more cooperatively? Inside this box, you also have a cooperative mode, where 1, 2, or 3 players will be on the same team, using champions from the same nation, fighting the marauders. Here, any unused ships will be placed onto the board for you to fight against, and each one will start with a set amount of health and damage. And players will win the game by getting the same number of prosperity points, but avoid being whacked by all these bad men. The marauders operate on a nice simple AI system where they'll attack if you're in range, and reinforce at the ends of certain rounds. But players are against the clock because they must score the right amount of prosperity within 15 rounds or they lose as a team. And that is basically all of quests and cannons. I'll remind you now that you can play this game in a variety of different ways and set the board up in lots of modular configurations. This one seats between 1 and 6 players and takes about 20 minutes per player and is available to pre-order right now. In Kabula from Stranger Games Studios, players are going on a big sandbox adventure. Before getting into this preview, it's important to mention that what we have here is a prototype of Kabula, and many of the components are not final. During the game, you're trying to fend off other players and fight monsters to claim the Kabula. But Kabula is a fantasy adventure game with a twist, because all the characters in this world are from the modern day. And now, in this weird new world, they can forge themselves a new identity. Kabula pitches itself as a satirical take on the fantasy genre. And as such, the game is packed with anachronism, flavour text, and jokes. And whilst I don't think the game is particularly to my sense of humour, it might be to yours. So let's talk about Kabula. At the start of the game, we will lay out this board and pepper it with encounter tokens, and each player will choose their own character, placing their miniature on the board and grabbing their starting cards. You'll also pick out a herald, which is going to be the monster that's guarding the Kabula itself. In this game, we've gone for this Water King, and we pop his board right here. And once everyone is ready, you can kick off. So how do you take an action in Kabula? Every action in the game is in a box like this. Its colour denoting its type, and its symbols showing its cost. Any costs in this game will be referred to in parts, which are these little tokens that your hero has on their board. The parts come in 5 different flavours: teeth, brain, legs, butt, and guts. The parts in your fresh box are available to be used by sliding them over to the used zone, but you've also got a rage box where parts are extra potent because you'll slide them 2 steps before using them. So let's start with the simplest action, which is to walk, spending a legs to move 2 steps. A step is simply crossing one of these lines on the board, so 2 steps might look like that. Many spaces on the board will have actions written on them, such as entering dungeons, having encounters, and provoking monsters. You also have these city segments on the board, which correspond to this little section here that will show you all the actions you can take in each city. But let's go back to those dungeons and encounters. When you go into those spaces, you draw a card from the Dungeons or Encounters pile and resolve its effect. Some of these responses might give you tags that correspond to the personality cards you have in front of you. So if you respond generously, you might put some tags on this idealistic card. Only fulfilled personality cards will allow the players to try and steal the Kabula and win the game. In cities, you can do lots of different things like paying money to heal or shopping. And shopping will give you a spread of item cards that you can use the actions on later during your turn. But getting items is also important when it comes to combat. Players are free to attack pretty much anything that moves in this game, but the systems for doing so are fairly straightforward. Any of these sword icons will cause a damage. And these nausea tokens that you might get in various different ways will cause a player to take even more. Sometimes though, the game will instruct you to roll aim, where you'll roll these dice and hope to hit the part that you're after. Now for some attacks this will increase their potency, but it also might trigger players' passive defenses. Wherever you see this icon, a player will block that kind of attack. And some attacks might push your opponents into neighbouring spaces or rolling them down hills. I'm focusing a little on fighting other players here, but really what you're mostly going to be fighting are monsters and the Herald. Monsters will stomp around the map doing damage, moving towards players according to their AI and trying to take bites out of them. But at some point, a player might try and tame this familio, popping it in front of them and then gaining access to their suite of abilities. You'll be able to use the actions listed on this familio by spending parts from their box. So maybe you'll send your familio off to go and hassle another player during their turn, or use them to help you defeat the Herald. The Herald will activate towards the end of each round, and has its own set of abilities and AI, as well as a big pool of event cards. Before the Kabula is stolen, the Herald will just stay in the sanctuary and draw cards, causing effects. But as soon as a player realises their personality and makes an attempt to steal the Kabula, the Herald will activate. You'll add the Herald onto the round order tracker, and now they'll start taking turns as well, trying to take chunks at whoever just stole the Kabula. But it's not just monsters and the Herald that the player who's stolen the Kabula has to worry about, because other players are going to be hunting them down too, because if the Herald is dead and a player has the Kabula, it triggers the end of the game. If the Herald is killed, the player who's holding the Kabula will win the game, but if all the players get wiped out before then no one wins. It's important to mention that whilst during the game the Kabula will revive any player who dies, as soon as it's stolen, that aspect is turned off. Any deaths are permanent and player elimination is possible. So that is Kabula, a sandbox adventure game where players are travelling this world and doing kind of whatever they fancy, with the ultimate goal of stealing this tree and getting out alive. This game takes about 30 minutes per player and seats between 2 and 4. The real draw here is the game's sense of humour, where there's plenty of flavour text and weird, anachronistic characters. If you're looking for something with the comedic sensibilities of a game maybe like Munchkin, then this is going to be your cup of tea, even though it's considerably more crass and rude, and obviously the systems are a bit more in-depth. So if you're picking up what that game is putting down and you want something a bit more sandboxy and maybe a little more crunchy, then Kabula is for you. And that is the end of this category of our AwSHUX previews series. If you want to check out more, then they'll be somewhere around my head right now, and if you're watching this between the 22nd and the 24th of October, you can come to our digital convention, AwSHUX, happening right now, with all kinds of demos in various booths for you to check out games big and small. That's it for this video. See you next time. Bye!